triumph, murder, deception, lies, revenge, suicide, death. All of these things have one thing in common: politics. Not just any politics, Roman politics. This is a story of Caius Gracchus. Caius Gracchus, also known as Caius Gracchus, lived in the shadow of his older brother Tiberius, and for the fear of his brother's enemies, isolated himself for much of his early life at home. His brother died before Caius was even 30. Soon after the murder of his brother, Caius Gracchus would let his temper show in the journey out into the world of politics. Early on in his career, he defended his friend Vitius in court, and the people were in ecstasy, while others in positions of power became jealous and feared Gracchus. The people in power realized that they must keep Caius from being made tribune. Caius was soon elected quaestor and sent to Sardinia. Caius was not opposed to the idea of being sent off to Sardinia because it would allow him the ability to not meddle with state affairs or appear in public. Caius Gracchus excelled in Sardinia. As Plutarch states, in doing justice to his inferior and in showing all obedience and respect to his superior officer, but likewise in temperance, frugality, and industry, he surpassed even those who were much older than himself. Then the winter months came. It was a horrid winter in Sardinia. The Romans were unprepared, and therefore the Roman soldiers needed clothes for the winter. So the general was forced to lay an imposition upon several towns. Caius Gracchus, on the other hand, had a different approach. Caius went from city to city, and, through his great speaking abilities, was able to convince the neighboring cities to donate clothes to the Roman people instead of forcing them. Jealousy arose in Rome over the powers in language that Caius held. To insult Caius, the soldiers were relieved and replaced, causing Orestes and Caius, as his quaestor, to remain. Caius, upon learning this, left Sardinia and headed back to Rome. People were outraged that a quaestor would leave his general, but in fact Caius had served 12 years in the army, whereas others only served 10. Caius returned with no riches to his name. People in power continued to oppress Caius and bring other accusations against him until finally Caius proved his innocence on all accounts. Caius then pursued the position of tribune with many people behind him willing to vote. Being the underdog in this political race, Caius was expected to be fourth tribune, but realized his orating skills and use of rhetoric to persuade the people was far more advanced than his competitors. So he used this advantage and persuaded the people through appealing to their passions, using examples of war against the Philistines, among other things. Caius, having moved the people in his favor, proposed two laws. First, whoever was turned out of any public office by the people should be thereby rendered incapable of bearing any office afterwards. The second, that if any magistrate condemn a Roman to be banished without a legal trial, the people be authorized to take cognizance thereof. These laws were directed at two men, Marcus Octavius and Populus. Both men were enemies of Caius's older brother, Tiberius. Marcus Octavius had been deprived of tribuneship at the instigation of Tiberius, and Populus had banished all of Tiberius's friends while in praetorship. Populus fled to Italy. Cornelia, Caius, and Tiberius's mother requested that Caius yield the charges against Octavius, which pleased the courts. Now, after setting laws that may have been selfish, as we will see later, Caius proposed new laws with the objective of pleasing the people. He was concerned with public land and the common soldier. The public land should be divided amongst the poor. The common soldiers should be clothed at the public charge without any of their money being taken. And none should be obliged to serve in the army who was not 17 years old. Another law proposed gave the same right of voting to all Italians in general that was enjoyed by the citizens of Rome. There was a fourth and a fifth law. The fourth law related to the price of corn, and the fifth law regulated the courts of justice. The corn prices would have been sold at a lower rate to the poor, and the senators in power in courts will be reduced in power. In arguing for these laws, Caius showed unusual earnestness and turned towards the people and talked to the people instead of the Senate House. Caius gained great respect among the provinces for his convincing the Senate House to pass such laws, but Caius continued to have bigger plans. He proposed measures for the colonization of several cities, for the making of roads, and for the building of public granaries. He would be the manager and superintendent of these public granaries. Caius soon proved to be a lovable person through his actions and how he greeted people with familiarity, without abandoning his dignity and his gentleness. The construction of the roads was his main priority. He wanted to make them beautiful and pleasant, as well as convenient. He gave directions to draw them up through the fields exactly in a straight line, partly paved with hewn stone and partly laid with solid masses of gravel. He would fill valleys with rubbish or build bridges to cross the valleys. The roads divided into miles made clear by pillars. For all of these reasons, he was very popular amongst the people and even praised by them. Caius requested only one favor from the people. He should think the greatest obligation in the world. Yet if it were denied, he would never blame them for the refusal. The world believed he wanted to be consul and tribune at the same time. On election day, Caius went into the field with his friend Caius Fannius. Caius Fannius was elected consul, and Caius Gracchus was elected tribune for the second time. But the tables turned as Caius realized that the senators were his declared enemies and that Fannius himself was none of the most zealous of friends, so he began to make other new laws. But the Senate knew he would gain too much power through these new laws and took a new and unusual course to alienate the people's affections from Caius by playing the demagogue in opposition to him and offering favors contrary to all good policy. Livius Drusus was a fellow tribune with Caius and soon became a rival to Caius. Livius offered to serve the Senate with his authority in this business and brought forth laws that were neither honorable nor advantageous for the public. All Livius planned on doing was to outbeat Caius in pleasing the populace. With the Senate on his side, Livius attempted to ruin Caius' career. Everything Caius did thus far had now been turned against him. The settlement of the colonies when referring to the better class citizens was seen as abuse. While Drusus proposed the sending out of 12 colonies with 3,000 persons, he praised. When Caius divided the public land amongst the poorer citizens and charged them small rent annually, there was an outrage, and the people were angry at Caius. They were mad at Caius for wanting rights given to the Latins. However, as Plutarch mentions, Livius appeased and mitigated this perverseness and animosity by his profession that he had done nothing in favor and for the benefit of commons without their advice and approbation. And Livius Drusus was praised for his kindness and justice towards the people because he never seemed to propose any law for his own sake or advantage, unlike Caius, who clearly used the laws to avenge his brother. Later in his career, Caius was tasked with the repeopling of Carthage, but soon returned home as all things started to go wrong for him. This was due to Drusus, who was seeking the position of consul. With his consulship, he would wholly ruin Caius, whose power, as we have seen, was already diminishing. Upon returning from Carthage, Caius moved from his wealthy estate in Rome into the streets of the Forum to live amongst the poor, to make himself more popular in those parts of the city. To drive supporters away from Caius, Fannius, the consul, who once supported Caius, commanded all persons who were not born Romans to depart from the city. Caius published an edict that condemned the actions of the consul and claimed that he would support any and all foreigners who were threatened if they supported him. But Caius failed to live up to his word, as one of his friends was taken away, and he did nothing. A way to come back from this embarrassment was to take down the scaffolds. The scaffolds were seats for the rich in the gladiatorial games that blocked the view of the audience. These were set up by people in power and the people that were rich. When no one listened to his order to take them down, he hired a group of laborers to take the scaffold down. The common people were happy with this and saw Caius as a man, but the people of power regarded it as a piece of violence and presumptuous interference. Because of this whole debacle, Caius was not re-elected to his third term of tribune. Opimius was chosen consul and began to cancel several of Cassius's laws. Caius chose to oppose the consul by force. When Opimius was supposed to abrogate the laws of Caius, both parties met and Quintus Intilius spoke to Opimius. He was shortly murdered. A frenzy broke out, and Caius returned to his home, sulking and grieving. The senators ordered that Opimius should have more power to protect the commonwealth and suppress all tyrants. Opimius commanded the senators to arm themselves and the Roman knights to be in readiness the next morning. They went directly to Caius's house, with a guard remaining there all night. There were two sets of guards posted up outside of Caius's house. The first guards at the house spent the night drinking and shouting, while the others were quiet and vigilant. Caius knew in the morning that it would be his fate to die, possibly. His wife begged him to take something to defend himself and pleaded with him not to go. She ends with, "What trust can we place either on the laws or in the gods?" She continued to weep. Caius went to the assembly where Opimius told him his terms and conditions. Caius did not comply, and thus chaos broke out. In the chaos, Caius retired to Diana's temple, where he attempted suicide. But his friends took his sword away from him and helped him in an attempt to escape. Caius attempted to escape, but was pursued closely by his enemies. He barely escaped into the woods, where his two friends tried to convince him to preserve his own life. As people came searching for him, Caius hid in a little grove with his slave. There, Caius had his servant take his own life. Thank you for listening to my presentation on Caius Gracchus by Plutarch.